You know, being cut off mid-sentence by dodgy software, or whatever the hell's going on, is very frustrating. That this keeps happening is driving me stark. I might have to shorten these to like 1 hour segments, because, like, I really don't like having to reboot my computer to, I have to do a hard restart too. Like, this is not a kindness. Um, it's very, very annoying. Anyway, the 9mm 205 grain rounds blew. Oh, that's right. I have to start my recording action again. The 9mm 205 grain rounds blew Yazawa's head off. Rei lowered his arms, gasping for air. After a few seconds, he slowly levered himself up into a crouch and rubbed the back of his neck, shaking his head to work out the stiffness. He cautiously flexed his limbs. Nothing seemed to be broken, at least. He stood up and surveyed the scene. Major Yazawa's body was sprawled out on the floor. The back of his head had been splattered across the wall and ceiling, dyeing their surfaces red. But there was no smell of blood. Massaging his solar plexus with his left hand, Rei aimed his gun at the lock on the metal door and fired a couple of shots at it. He gave the door a sharp kick, and it opened onto a stairwell. He started climbing. Upon reaching the uppermost level, he spotted what looked like an exit, a doorway glowing with daylight. He ran through it and emerged into a bizarre landscape. It didn't look like Faery. He was standing at the edge of a flat, smooth plain that stretched out before him like a sheet of blue ice. Thick clouds hung so low it seemed as if he could reach out and touch them. The underground entrance he'd just emerged from was situated in a forest, and around him the trees shimmered in metallic green hues. Looking back through the strange trees, he saw a pond that glowed a sickly yellow. The surface roiled, as if the liquid were boiling. He shifted his gaze back toward the open space ahead of him. There was a strip of transparent, plastic-like ground that could have been a runway. He followed it with his eyes and found Yukikaze. She was sitting on level ground about a quarter-mile away. He left the cover of the forest and ran toward her. He concentrated on his objective, blocking out the fact that he was completely out in the open now, an easy target. He saw two figures approaching Yukikaze, pilots who were going to steal her from him. Jam. Panting for breath, Rei screamed at them to stop. One of them turned at the sound. The strength abruptly drained from Rei's shooting arm. It was Lieutenant Bergadish. Lieutenant? Rei began to doubt his senses, wondering if he really was mentally ill. Was this entire bizarre sequence a hallucination? He took several steps forward, then saw the man standing beside Bergadish and froze in shock. He was looking at himself. Jam! He fired, and the other Rei went down. Pain lashed through his right side. He saw Lieutenant Bergadish holding a gun and fired back. Bergadish crumpled, and several rapid shots from Rei's gun ended his life. Rei put a hand to his side. The familiar, distinct smell of blood wafted up. He was bleeding badly. He approached the two bodies and looked down at them. He didn't think that they were Jam. These were androids created by the Jam. The Jam, who had until now ignored humans, were working out a strategy to target them here. They were creating weapons. Organic anti-personnel weapons. Just as humans had made Yukikaze, the Jam were now making humans. The aliens probably had only a tenuous understanding of human existence. To fight humanity, they probably needed to manufacture weapons that could sense a human at the same level as a human, the same way that humans were using computers to analyze the Jam. If so, it was another piece of evidence that the Jam were mechanical life forms. And, if so, the parameters of the war had shifted from machines made by humans fighting the Jam to humans made by the Jam fighting humans. The insanity of the situation tore at Rei's mind. Even though the Jam and humanity could barely comprehend the other's existences, they were being forced to fight for the sake of the weapons they both made. The Jam may have been even more vexed than the humans, wondering why a machine like Yukikaze, who was like one of their own kind, was attacking them. Rei approached Yukikaze, hauled himself up the boarding ladder, and climbed into the cockpit. He was relieved to see that the ejection seat seemed to have been properly installed. He couldn't stop the bleeding from the gunshot wound in his side. Pressing his left hand to the wound, he started the engines. Looking out of the cockpit, Rei saw a yellow mass headed for Yukikaze. It looked like the same substance that had filled the pond in the forest. As it flowed toward them across the flat ground, it morphed and reformed like protoplasm. Shapes would rise from the ooze and melt back into it again as it moved. Human shapes. Human limbs and heads and torsos. Above them swirled a glinting cloud of small black objects, like a giant swarm of bees. Were those insect-like forms the Jam? He switched Yukikaze's ECM system on. Her engines roared. Parking brake off. The canopy lowered and locked. "Let's go home, Yukikaze." The humanoid mass pressed up against Yukikaze's body. He slid the throttle to mill, incinerating the portion behind them. Yukikaze turned, accelerated, and took off. Landing gear up. FCS on. Master arm switch to arm. They shot into a climbing turn. A cold sweat had broken out on Rei's brow, and he could feel the blood pooling in his flight suit. Yukikaze fired her last remaining high-velocity missile into the black swarm of insects. The flare of the detonation, like a miniature sun, temporarily robbed Rei of his sight. When he opened his eyes, Yukikaze was flying in familiar airspace. She was going slow, almost brushing the canopy of Faery's forest. Rei looked up at the blue sky. The gunshot wound hurt like hell, but he felt a lot better. "We made it back," he thought. But the threat hadn't vanished. As they began to accelerate and climb, Yukikaze's radar picked up 3 Jam fighters to the rear, practically on top of them. Flying as low and slow as they were, there was no way for them to evade. There was a burst of cannon fire. Yukikaze's right vertical stabilizer shattered. Fire spouted from her right engine. Describing a wide turn, she plunged toward the forest. Rei lost consciousness. When he came to, he realized that he had miraculously survived. They had made an emergency landing on the spongy surface of forest canopy, which was dozens of yards thick, robust enough to support the fighter's weight. The Jam hadn't withdrawn, but had ceased their attack. "Analyzing Yukikaze to the bitter end," Rei thought. He activated her self-destruct system. No response. He then remembered. The switch in the electronic warfare officer's seat had to be thrown as well. He started to release the seat harness, his hands slippery with blood, then stopped. His arms weren't working very well, and besides, it looked like the self-destruct wouldn't be necessary. Yukikaze's rear section was burning furiously. It was only a matter of time until the fuel tanks ignited. Rei closed his eyes. He doubted he could pull the eject lever, and he didn't even feel like trying. This was the death he'd always imagined. "It's better this way," he thought. He'd always felt that this moment would come one day, the moment when he and Yukikaze would die together. He heard a beep. Rei slitted his eyes open. He had the fanciful thought that Yukikaze was saying goodbye to him. As he looked at the multi-display, his eyesight grew dim. He slowly reached out and turned the brightness control up. On the screen was the symbol for a single TAF plane flying toward them. "The FRX-00. Too late. Too late." The canopy was now dyed crimson with the light of the flames burning behind him. Enough, thought Rei. He was going to die with Yukikaze. It was all he'd ever wanted. She had never betrayed him. However, she then did something he couldn't have anticipated, a singular action beyond anything he could have imagined. His eyes widened as he read the display. Link FRX00-05003. Trans CCIF. What? Transferring core functions of SAF5 Unit 3 to FRX00. Rei screamed at her to stop, but no sound came from his throat. Yukikaze was... She was abandoning this aircraft. She was abandoning him. Glowing columns of numbers and characters began to flow down the display. Yukikaze was transferring her Central Combat Information file to the FRX. There was nothing Rei could do to stop it. He became aware that his vision was growing dark. He couldn't hear anything. He couldn't see anything. He had the sensation that he was soaring in skies where fairies danced. Faery airspace. Trans CCIF complete, blinked on the display. Rei didn't see it. Yukikaze had kept him aboard to initiate the self-destruct sequence in case the need for it arose during the transfer. As soon as the transfer was complete, she ejected him. He was thrown clear of Yukikaze and into the air, but he was long past the point of consciousness. Major James Booker sat in the rear seat of FRX 00-05003, monitoring the new plane's electronic warfare armaments. Just after they acquired the 3 enemy planes, he noticed an abnormality in the FRX's central computer. Its learning section was still fairly clean, but the rest of it began to run wild.
What the hell is this?
He wondered aloud. A huge amount of data was being transferred from somewhere.
Is this a new jam tactic?
In the same instant that the thought formed in his mind, the FRX-00 kicked into a high G acceleration.
What is it? What's going on?
The pilot said over the comm, his voice tight with tension.
I don't have control. Major, I thought this couldn't function as an unmanned plane. Could be the jam. Kill the flight controls. They won't disengage. Can we eject? No way. We're going way too fast.
Far away, at a distant point in the forest that spread out below them, Major Booker saw black smoke rising.
Can that be Yukikaze? Get us over there now. It's not responding to anything I do. We might have a fatal defect here. And what's with all this data input?
The FRX-00 closed rapidly on the 3 jam fighters, passed them at full power, and then banked steeply into a high G turn. The maneuver sent Major Booker and the pilot into G-loc. It continued its turn around the 3 jam aircraft. GLOC is, I don't remember what that stands for. I think they'll say it in the abbreviation section, but it's what you basically black out from G-forces. It happens. It continued its turn around the 3 jam aircraft, plotting an orthogonal attack line to their course, and took that heading. It flew direct abeam toward the jam at supersonic speed. An instant later, it was veering up and away, the 3 enemy aircraft disintegrating behind it, ripped apart by high-velocity fire. The FRX-00 rolled out of its loop and dove toward the forest. It centered Yukikaze in its gun sight and fired a short burst. The rounds impacted precisely on the area of the fuselage housing Yukikaze's central computer, silencing it forever. The fuel tanks ignited, and an orange fireball blossomed on the forest canopy. Metal fragments torn off in the blast danced in the air, reflecting the twilight glow of Faery's twin suns. The FRX-00 picked up the rescue beacon signaling the position of Yukikaze's ejected pilot, and relayed this information to Tab 15, the nearest frontline base. However, it did not respond to the inquiries of the search and rescue team regarding the condition of the survivor. as though it wasn't interested in human life and death. It took a return course for Faery Base, flying in auto mode. Opening a communications link with the Tactical Air Force SAF control room, it relayed the following: DE Yukikaze, ETA 2146, AR. Yukikaze, having obtained a new body for herself, flew on at supersonic speed. Major Booker and the pilot, still unconscious, didn't see her transmission to Faery Base of her estimated time of arrival. Neither could they see the setting suns, the sky of Faery as its colors shifted to night, nor the forests below. Yukikaze landed back at Faery Base and informed Control that her mission was complete. 6 TAISPs had been successfully dropped at the target sites. Mission success rate? 100%. The Faery Air Force acknowledged. Yukikaze's... Oh, there's no comment. There's no comma there. The Faery Air Force acknowledged Yukikaze's mission completion. Or, at least, the computers did, if not the humans. And there was no doubt that the jam recognized it as well. Yukikaze taxied over to the SAF section and was towed onto the elevator platform. She descended, vanishing into her lair to prepare herself for the next battle. And, however briefly, silence returned to the planet Faery. And that was Yukikaze by Chohei Kambayashi. Man, if you didn't think things were pretty Philip K. Dick before, they got there quick. You got it in spades this time around. One of the ways I like to describe it is it's like Philip K. Dick by way of air. I was about to say Air Combat, which is technically the name of the first Ace Combat title. Ace Combat, or Ace Combat by way of Philip K. Dick. I don't know which way makes more sense. Anyway, suffice it to say, the book is wild. It has some great ideas. However, the original Yukikaze runs so that Good Luck Yukikaze can fly. I have not read book 3 or 4 because they'll never be translated, and I don't know Japanese. It's I can read like Kinder Japanese. I can read Pidgin. I can read very little. Sure, that would be a way to learn how, but I'd need a lot more concentration power than I currently have. Anyway, yeah, so pretty great. What I really like is how Yukikaze kind of becomes a character in her own right over the course of the book. We take that to farther shores in Good Luck Yukikaze. But she never really seems like a human character at all, ever. It's you never will mistake her for anything other than something very, very different than us. All right, so now we've got the Yukikaze fact sheet, which is not just one page, not just 2 pages, but like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pages of fact sheet materials. Yukikaze fact sheet. Aircraft serial number 79113. Division attachment number SAF V05003. Development number FRX47. Model designation number FFR31-MR. Model name Super Sylph. Attachment Faery Air Force, Tactical Air Force, Faery Base Tactical Combat Air Group, Special Air Force 5th Squadron. Personal name Yukikaze. General specifications. The Super Sylph's principal role is to carry out tactical electronic surveillance, To meet the requirements for supersonic cruising and high maneuverability, it is equipped with twin Phoenix Mark X FNX-5010-J engines. The main airfoils are fixed, backswept clipped delta wings. However, the wing cross-section can be adjusted by the flight control computer in order to compensate for varying flight conditions and thus achieve optimal configuration. A ventral fin is attached to the underside of the fuselage, with a shape different from that of a mainline combat sylphid in order to facilitate high speed over maneuverability. Its twin vertical stabilizers contain speed brakes, the deployment of which is limited according to CAS, calibrated airspeed, altitude, and aircraft altitude. Aircraft attitude. Speed brake deployment in dogfight and automaneuver mode is handled by the flight control computer, but can be used to effect a sudden attitude change when in manual mode. The aircraft has two seats, with the pilot in the front and the electronic warfare officer/flight officer in the rear. Both seats recline to relieve the flight crew's burden during high G maneuvering. Directly in front of the pilot's seat is the HUD heads-up display. Below that is the multifunction display, flight instrumentation, and the BIT, built-in test, system display. On the pilot's right is the side stick flight controller. On the side stick are mounted the dogfight switch, gun trigger, missile release, side force/pitch controls, and G limiter switch, all of which enable the pilot to control the plane without removing his hand from the stick. On the pilot's left is the throttle, on which are mounted the target management switch, radar mode selector, and armament selector. The rear seat has no flight control instruments and is equipped instead with the ECM controls, ECM display, electronic data collection controls, IFF display, and communications/navigation display. The engine air intakes and exhaust ports utilize a two-dimensional design. Their cross-section shapes can be automatically manipulated by the air intake and nozzle controllers. Variation of the exhaust nozzle area is used to steer the plane and to improve maneuverability. High maneuverability mode is selected by turning the dogfight switch to on. 2. Avionics and engine systems. The sylphid's static stability margin is negative. The pilot's instructions, as input via the side stick controller, are input into an integrated avionics system that includes the flight control computer, the aircraft's central computer, and the direct control unit. Under normal flight, the flight control computer combines the input from the side stick with the flight data from a multitude of sensors to control the hydraulic actuators of the aircraft's control surfaces. If the flight control computer is rendered inoperative, the central computer and direct control unit will compensate, controlling the direct control assemblies set on all control surfaces. The direct control unit can also operate independently of the flight computer and central computer so that flight stability may be maintained even in the unlikely event of a central computer failure. In this case, advanced flight control of the automatic landing, tactical guidance, and supersonic bombing protocols is impossible. However, by interfacing the inertial guidance and aircraft attitude sensors, altitude and course may be automatically maintained. The engines are twin FNX 5010-J axial compression turbofans equipped with afterburners. These were later replaced with the FNX 5011B, commonly known as the Phoenix Mark 11. The FRX-99 and FRX-00 are equipped with the FNX 5011C and FNX 5011D variants, respectively. The 5011, Mark 11, line of engines can burn hydrogen fuel as well as standard jet fuel. When burning hydrogen fuel, it can operate as a ramjet. Ooh, that's very cool. To select ram air mode, the pilot must slide the throttle past the max position to the MR position. However, below speeds of M 2.0, Mach 2 I assume, and an altitude of 60,000 feet on Faery, it will not operate. The pilot can move the throttle freely between the max and MR positions. There is no stopper between the positions, but regardless of the individual lever settings, the pilot must maintain a constant 15 pounds of pressure on the throttle to hold it at the MR position. Selecting the MR mode automatically switches over the fuel system, intake configuration, and engine operation. MR mode should yield a thrust increase of 160% over the regular afterburners, although the exact increase will vary according to the indicated airspeed and altitude. That makes sense because you have less atmosphere that you're sucking up hydrogen from. That's very cool. I don't remember that factoid. When the afterburners are engaged, once the fuel level in the feed tanks drops below a certain point, the afterburner shutoff valve closes and they are no longer usable. It is possible to override this by turning the Vmax switch to on, but because the fuel consumption rate is significantly higher when using afterburners, the danger of running out of fuel also increases significantly. Switching to Vmax will simultaneously cut out all engine system limiters as well as the aircraft's G limiter. It should not be used except in emergencies. When the auto maneuver system is on, it may also automatically engage Vmax if prompted to do so by the central computer. In that situation, it is impossible to manually switch Vmax off. Once the central computer confirms that the emergency has ended, it will automatically return to normal engine mode. Engine control is executed via an integrated electronic control system based on data provided to it by the flight control computer, various sensors, and the central computer. The engine controller of the 5011 line, the Mark 11, is programmed to realize maximum efficiency not only in the atmosphere of Faery, but also in Earth's atmosphere, with the flight control computer automatically selecting the appropriate mode. 3. Weapons System. The Sylphid's fire control system consists of the FCR, fire control radar, IR, infrared receivers, passive airspace radar, passive wide area search radar, the fire control computer, navigation computer, and so on, all under the integrated command of the tactical computer, with the central computer acting as backup. The fire control computer will automatically select the pulse Doppler FCR mode and then identify and track the target, determine target range, calculate attack vectors, select armaments, determine missile launch timing, number of missiles, guidance data for active homing missiles, and so on. The fire control radar possesses a wide range of modes, including a long-range search and detection. Oh, sorry, there is no A there. Including long-range search and detection, long-range measurement, single target tracking, multiple target tracking, short and medium-range search and detection, ground attack, short and medium-range single target tracking, pilot-initiated radar lock, and rapid lock-on. The Super Sylph is equipped with a 20mm Vulcan nose cannon. With its high-velocity ammunition and firing control mechanisms, it can be used even at supersonic speed. The Super Sylph can be loaded out with air-to-air and air-to-ground missiles, as well as precision-guided explosive ordnance. Its main air-to-air missile armaments are the AAM-3, 4, and 5, short, medium, and long-range missiles, respectively. They can function as passive or active homing missiles, or they can be guided from the aircraft. The internal AI systems will self-select guidance mode as well as optimal detonation timing. HAAM, high-velocity air-to-air missile, armaments were later implemented to increase missile flight velocity. 4. Miscellaneous. The Super Sylph can also carry a variety of mission-specific tactical data collection pods, such as a TARPS, Tactical Aerial Reconnaissance Pod System. The TARPS has electronic intelligence data collection capabilities and mounts a variety of cameras, but possesses no AI system of its own. If the plane's central computer judges the data collected by the TARPS to be especially vital, it will be added to its data file. The Super Sylph possesses an advanced wireless digital data link function, allowing the plane's central computer to maintain direct, secure communications with the base tactical control computers via the tactical data line. Details of engine performance, avionics instrumentation, and exact airframe dimensions have not been publicly released on Earth. The figures below represent estimated performance in Earth standard gravity. FNX 5011B. Dry weight, 2,425 pounds, 1.1 tons. Maximum thrust, what does that stand for? LBF? Pounds of force. There we go. 21,605 pounds of force, 9.8 tons, military power. 31,967 pounds of force, 14.5 tons, or 14.5 tons on full afterburner, and 49,604 pounds of force, or 22.5 tons, at MB power. FFR 31-MR. Length 64 feet 11 inches, 19.8 meters. Wingspan 44 feet 3 inches, or 13.5 meters. Height 20 feet 4 inches, 6.2 meters. Empty weight 26,015 pounds, 11.8 tons. She ain't heavy, she's my plane. Loaded weight 54,010 pounds, or 24.5 tons. Maximum takeoff weight 83,775 pounds, or 38.0 tons. From Appendix, Mainline Fighter Craft of the FAF in The Invader by Lynn Jackson. Clearly I should have read the whole thing in her voice. It would have been a golden opportunity, but I didn't do it. I'm a fool, and I apologize. Okay. About Yukikaze. The book you hold is a new edition of Yukikaze. I was fortunate enough, I don't know what I just said there. I was fortunate enough to be granted the opportunity to revise the original edition and went through it thoroughly, but in the end I did not make any pronounced changes. I revisited some of the wording, but was careful not to modify any section too much. The fundamental composition of the book itself remains completely unchanged. 20 years have passed since Yukikaze was first published in February of 1984. Rereading the original edition, I realized that the significance of this passage of time was actually much greater than I had first thought. The book definitely felt like something I wrote, but I found myself wanting to know more background detail than what had been provided, to get more under the surface of things. In short, the issues I was interested in writing about back then, and what I'm interested in now, have changed. If I were to try writing the book all over again today, I imagine it would end up with a quite different tone. It would almost be like rewriting another author's work. The creation process of the original edition of the book was informed by my interests, worldview, sensitivities, and mindset at the time. While making the revisions, I believed that it was important for both the fans of the old edition as well as for the readers picking up the book for the first time to maintain that original flavor. I considered what had changed in the real world since the old edition came out and also what hadn't changed. Doing so forced me to think about the book on a personal level. I was able to make corrections and revisions according to my current mindset, but hopefully without violating the subtle impressions a reader may have formed from the old edition. I decided that if I wanted to create something that reflected my current interests, it would be better for me to write a new book than to try rewriting an old one. That was what drove me to write the sequel volume, Good Luck, Yukikaze. The parts of this book that were changed include some small amendments intended to link it better with the new story. Setting aside the issue of whether or not I should have done so, the intent was to make the book more consistent with future sequels. With that aim, I gratefully offer up this new, improved edition to all the fans of Yukikaze. Chohei Kambayashi, Matsumoto, March 2002. Oh, I forgot to mention, because I said I would. That soup that not the D type amino acid. Um, the chicken quote chicken soup unquote. That was Lieutenant Burgadish. Yeah, yeah, he's dead, and Ray ate a bit of him. Yeah, I think Good Luck Yukikaze makes that explicit. This book did not. Um, I know the OVA makes it explicit. It's got a similar scene. It's different because it's hybridizing both that chapter and some stuff that happens in Good Luck Yukikaze. So it's a bit different. Um, that OVA series is kind of wild. It winds up there's a couple of the episodes wind up being like two chapters at once. Like two of them are two chapters at once. One of them is a hybrid, and like two of them are like standalone, are their own full chapters. Um, I could probably tell you which ones were adapted, but I'm not going to, because I'd have to recheck some stuff and rewatch the series. It's pretty good. If you want this animated, I do recommend checking it out, but bear in mind you are going to have parts of Good Luck Yukikaze spoiled, and I am absolutely going to read that on stream at some point. I don't know when. Maybe this year. We'll find out. Mecha Mondays has worked as a reading exercise, has worked out very well. Part of the reason I decided to shift to doing that was because it dawned on me, you have a ton of books with giant robots in and stuff that's adjacent. I think you can do this. Anyway, we have some more reading here. Human/inhuman. Throughout Yukikaze, the terms human and human-like are set in opposition to inhuman and mechanical. First and foremost, the book's theme is the question of what it means to be human. We are shown again and again how the enigmatic invading aliens known as the JAM are completely unlike humans, how communication with them is impossible, how there is no chance of mutual understanding. Through examining this portrait of the thoroughly inhuman Jam, we are able to discern the reverse image of what it is to be human. If to be inhuman is to have no logical method of communication, then to be human is to possess the gift of communication. The inhuman nature of the members of the SAF charged with intelligence gathering is also stressed in the story. The main character, Rei Fukai, is assigned to the SAF, and it is through him that the question of what it means to be human is asked again and again. One could make the argument that Rei, too, is an inhuman being. However, although his character is that of a cold man, a loner, I don't believe that these traits consign him to the realm of inhumanity. The trust he places in his beloved plane, Yukikaze, is highly idiosyncratic, a very human trait. On this point, taking the character of Rei into account, I'd like to examine the story's main theme of what it is to be human. The book opens with an excerpt from The Invader, the book by Lynn Jackson on the subject of the Jam War that was published 5 years before the timeline of the main story. Opening the novel with an excerpt from a fictional, non-fiction history is effective in establishing an air of verisimilitude. Within the excerpt, Jackson talks about the soldiers of the SAF. The pilots of the SAF evidently take a certain satisfaction in this requirement, and individuals with special personalities outside the range of normal human standards are selected for this duty. These men put more faith in their machines than in other people, and can fly their planes with perfect skill. In a way, they are yet one more combat computer, but organic in nature, loaded aboard the sylphids to carry out a heartless duty. She goes on to describe the pilots as machines that are, through some accident of fate, in human form. So what are these normal human standards Lynn Jackson is talking about? With this phrase, she's referring not to the set of traits common to most humans, but rather to the broader concept of humanity. Typically, this term is used to indicate the capacity to experience emotions, with the ability to love being the crucial element. Conversely, inhumanity, although it bears the connotations of cruelty or sadism, essentially denotes the inability to express emotion or sympathy. According to one line of thought, what makes us human is our capacity for empathy. What this means is, if I see things and feel things a certain way, I can make the cognitive analogy that others also see and feel things a certain way. The theory is that the development of the empathic capacity marked a major step in the evolutionary process of the human brain. In other words, we can say that what makes us human is our ability to understand the sorrow another person feels by drawing on our own experiences. What fascinates me is that the main elements that differentiate us from the other animals, such as the ability to reason, have little to do with humanity when seen from this point of view. To the contrary, logical thought, which is the gift of reason, is often shown in a negative light, as being inhuman. It is therefore not unreasonable to view machine intelligence, which is based exclusively on logic, as something that is fundamentally inhuman. Yukikaze frequently depicts this inhuman lack of empathy. In the beginning of Chapter 1, the SAF's mission to bring their data back to base, even as they watch their comrades die in battle, is criticized as being inhuman. The reader soon discovers that the target of this criticism is the book's hero, Rei Fukai. In his very first appearance, Rei is depicted announcing in an emotionless voice that his fellow pilots have been shot down. He then decides without any hesitation that a plane, which is by all appearances an allied unit, is an enemy and coolly attacks it. In the following pages, the military doctor who treats him refers to him as a machine. In this way, the author appears to be inducing the reader to see Rei as an inhuman character. However, in the same chapter, Rei's behavior is far different from that of a machine. He declares his trust in his plane, grumbles about General Cooley, and talks with Major Booker, his only friend, about a woman who he was involved with. And, recognizing his own powerlessness in the face of the unknown jam, he feels anger, grief, and anxiety. "What am I doing? Why am I here?" he asks. The chapter begins with an epigraph telling us that he'd been betrayed by much of what he had once loved, and that his only emotional support now came from his fighter plane. Establishing that he has known both love and hate makes it difficult for a reader to regard Rei as inhuman. Lynn Jackson's understanding of the SAF pilots as machines that are, through some accident of fate, in human form, is incorrect as far as Rei is concerned. Rei's affection for Yukikaze also undermines the concept of him as a machine-like individual. It is a uniquely human trait to feel empathy not only for another being like oneself, but also for animals or even inanimate objects. Then that he feels empathy for a machine is, ironically, a powerful confirmation of Rei's humanity. The irrational trust he places in Yukikaze, the faith he has that she would never ever betray him, and his extreme fear of her becoming independent of him negate any claims that he is inhuman and mechanical. Rei's callous, inhuman exterior is consistently betrayed by his inner humanity. Furthermore, from the very start of the story, the author continually portrays Rei questioning what it is to be human. Now, let's look at Chapter 5, Faery Winter, wherein Major Booker directly addresses the issue of what it means to be human. Imagining what it's like for the wounded Lieutenant Amata, Booker judges him to be a soul that was easily bruised. He was a man endowed with the rich, common humanity you hardly ever saw in Boomerang Squadron. Humans cannot live alone. Amata couldn't live estranged from his friends. Rei, however, was different. Impersonal, detached. It was as if he had no need for human contact at all. In other words, valuing relationships with other people is a mark of being human. Considering affection to be an aspect of human nature is a natural thing to do, but on the other hand, self-interest also plays a major part. Indeed, it may be an essential attribute of all life. So, how do we reconcile this contradiction? I can't help but feel that Yukikaze addresses the gap between human nature and human kindness in various scenes. "Not my problem," is the favorite saying of the soldiers in Boomerang Squadron. The squadron was put together by General Cooley, its membership consisting of soldiers with little sense of sociability or cooperation. As you might expect, as a group they lack empathy for others. They are all individualists with enough mental strength to endure the isolation imposed by their mission. Their thinking is extremely logical, making them elite soldiers who have a high probability of survival on the battlefield. Does that make them inhuman? Major Booker seems to think it does to some extent, but at the same time he also understands the severity of their duty. Yukikaze is a story of a possibly endless war with unknown invaders. The author has constructed an extreme situation in which the bizarre battlefield and the enemy being fought aren't seen except from the perspective of high-velocity air battles. This does not seem like an auspicious setting for an inquiry into human nature, and yet that is the author's constant aim. At one point, Major Booker asks, "Should we therefore abandon our humanity?" It is a question that goes grandly round and round without ever arriving at the desired answer. Extended to its extreme meaning, that question is, do we abandon our humanity, or do we choose death? Booker chooses to help Amata in order to wriggle out of that conceptual tight spot, to attempt to regain some of his lost humanity. He goes so far as to admit to himself that he's doing so to atone for how he must send his best friend out into the battlefield again and again. Major Booker is the other main character in Yukikaze, a man tormented by the suffering and lives lost to an absurd war. A man who feels that, rather than revealing humanity's true nature, the war is actually erasing it. He fears that the only way to beat the jam is for humans to become machine-like. The SAF soldiers' inhumanity is deliberate. Booker observes that, even if the Earth were to vanish tomorrow, they wouldn't shed a single tear. Even regarding Rei, his best friend, he thinks about how that expressionless look on his face never changed, no matter what chaos was happening around him. Major Booker has a terrible foreboding about the consequences of these inhuman humans coming into being. Something similar to his desire to preserve his subordinates' humanity on a harsh and strange battlefield shows up in the book's sequel, Good Luck, Yukikaze, although in less dire circumstances. Although Rei is perceived as inhuman, we can definitely see that he is cognizant of his own humanity. When the realization begins to dawn on him that the war against the jam is one of alien versus machine, and that the humans are unneeded in it, he reflexively denies it out of fear. The inhuman rational response would be the inhuman rational response would be to calmly accept being a part of the machine. Chapter 4, Indian Summer, ends with a touching scene in which Rei sheds tears for the fallen soldier Tomahawk John, an act that truly belies his image as a callous soldier. In that moment, Rei's inhumanity is exposed as nothing more than a mask he wears, a shell he maintains to protect himself. Tomahawk John, whose mechanical heart has been attacked by the jam, asks, "I'm human, aren't I?" just before he dies. "Of course you are," Rei answers, and then thinks back to when he told Tomahawk, "You're alive, or are you telling me that you're actually a corpse?" It could be said that Rei's cold and factual approach, one that provides no room for emotional judgments, is a rational survival mechanism he adopted to adapt to his harsh environment. To him, being alive is the same as being human, so even if an individual possesses some sort of physical or mental deficiency, it is impossible for Rei to question their humanity. The essential thing is that they are alive. That's why Rei is focused on the imperative of survival. Despite the fact that he flies a highly advanced fighter plane and doesn't proactively participate in the battles on the front line, he still has a strong feeling that death is never far from him. The conviction that they must kill the enemy or be killed themselves could explain the high success rate of the SAF pilots. In the end, the battlefield demands the cold-hearted living, not the empathic dead. Without recognizing that the war itself produces inhumanity, criticizing Rei's decision as inhuman is nonsensical. Surely we could apply this to machine intelligence as well. Let's take a look at Chapter 6, All Systems Normal. The unmanned Yukikaze kills Captain O'Donnell aboard the Fand 2 by instructing it to execute violent evasive maneuvers. If it hadn't done so, the Fand 2 would have been shot down. However, there was also the possibility that O'Donnell might have been saved if Yukikaze had sacrificed herself. However, Yukikaze never even considered that course of action. Because she learned how to fight from Rei, whose prime directive was to survive no matter what, Yukikaze had been trained to act a certain way on the battlefield. You could say that what she did was inevitable. Fighter planes are built to fight. Their objective is always one of destruction. That's true in reality and true for the reality within the novel. So as long as a fighter plane's electronic brain is given the objective of destroying an enemy so that it can survive, it will continue to carry out actions which we humans may regard as horrifying, but which are, according to the logic of that objective, entirely appropriate. It is we humans alone who apply the rule of whether what machines do is human or inhuman, as a machine intelligence does not yet exist that can challenge us on the subject. The whole concept of humanity is extremely vague, and tied as we are to a human point of view, and depending on our personalities, some of us can't help but be uncomfortable with using terms like human nature. I secretly feel that Yukikaze is a product of that discomfort. The author devoted a lot of his later works to portraying machine intelligence in what I've often thought of as his search for the key to unlock the very real conundrum of the human and the inhuman. I find the image of Yukikaze as a battle spirit dancing in the skies of Faery to be a beautiful one. In fact, it's hard for me to believe that people can't see the beauty in such high-performance machines. However, although Yukikaze is beautiful, she was created to fight. I have a momentary thought. If Yukikaze were not a weapon of destruction and slaughter and had been made merely for the sake of flying, would it even matter as long as we deny her her own identity? Rei accepted her as an individual. He saw her not as a goddess of destruction, but as a spirit of the wind who flew free. Yukikaze herself would most likely reject his selfish view of her as nonsense either way. For Yukikaze, the simple fact of her existence would most likely be enough. And that was Human/Inhuman by Ran Ishido. Alrighty, we have one last essay here. This has gone on quite a while. We have a last essay here, and then we have, which is not too long, it's maybe 10 pages, 8 pages, sorry. And then we have abbreviations and acronyms. The Jam Are There. Yukikaze was first released in 1984, a year when the topic of literary conversation was dominated by George Orwell's book. Today, there are probably people reading this revised edition of Yukikaze who weren't even born then. At that time, Chohei Kambayashi was already known as an energetic rising star who enthralled science fiction fans with a succession of works overflowing with a wisdom so sharp that it seemed to threaten to cut off the fingers of those who turned the pages. Even so, to be honest, I think the unusual breadth of his body of work up to that point generated a vague sense of unease in not a few of his readers. Yes, genius is a fairly impressive thing to behold, but where was this author going? What would he try to write next? Would he fall into the trap of being a jack of all trades and a master of none, a writer who produced nothing more than a string of clever diversions? But when a lone plane soared through the skies of Faery, I was convinced. This author was going to become one whose contributions would be writ large in the history of Japanese science fiction. With Yukikaze, Chohei Kambayashi distilled the essence of the themes on which he would stake his life as an author and infused them fully into a single work. What are words? What are machines? What are the humans who make and use them, and who are made and used in return? These basic questions were not presented as abstract philosophical arguments, but were instead developed as concrete reality for the characters to deal with. Kambayashi was able to take these questions, which he had initially raised in his early short works like Kotoba Tsukai Shi, The Wordsmith, and others, and turned them into gripping, exciting stories in both novel and serialized form, with the publication of Kateki wa Kaizoku, Pirates Are the Enemy, and Yukikaze within half a year of each other. It was philosophical speculation turned entertainment, and the enjoyment of the stories led to fresh speculation. It was truly what science fiction aspires to be. The reader who has picked up Yukikaze knowing it's a special work but hasn't yet read it might not imagine how the basic questions of human existence are hidden in what appears to be just a story about a cool fighter plane battling enemies in the skies of an alien planet. That said, you don't have to read it as some sort of deep work that deals with these complicated issues. If you don't go into it looking for deep meaning and simply become intoxicated by the story, as I did, then you will undoubtedly be led to think about these important things on your own. There are the Jam, who invade Earth via a hyperspace passageway that appears suddenly in the Antarctic. On the other side of the passageway lies the planet Faery, the actual location of which is unknown. To halt the alien invasion at the water's edge, so to speak, humanity organizes a supranational air force and constructs frontline bases on Faery. Within the Faery Air Force are a group of cold-hearted pilots who keep even their own allies at a distance, the 5th Squadron of the Special Air Force, aka Boomerang Squadron. Their duty is to not directly join in the battle, but rather to single-mindedly gather combat intelligence and then get back to base alive, even if it means letting their fellow pilots die. And for this purpose, they have been given Super Sylphs, the most powerful fighter planes in the Faery Air Force, which are equipped with highly advanced computer systems, high-output engines, and powerful weaponry for self-defense. The soldiers of Boomerang Squadron are, naturally, ultra-elite pilots, and in carrying out their heartless duty, they trust the judgment of their computers far more than that of their fellow humans. They're people who require special personalities, which allow them to practically become one with their machines. At one point in the novel, they're described as machines that are, through some accident of fate, in human form. First Lieutenant Rei Fukai, ace pilot of the SAF, flies into battle with Yukikaze, the plane he trusts more than any human, so that he can survive another day. The basic architecture of the story is meant to separate us from the messy and complicated elements of human society and to create an isolated, experimental environment where we can observe humans continually fighting their enemies. Incidentally, this type of story, in which humans are placed in an isolated environment subjected to certain rules and conditions and then observed in minute detail, would become a hallmark of Kambayashi's writing. It's exactly the same as how a scientist cultivates a microorganism to experiment on and observe its behavior. Since these novels are written as though they are records of experiments, I like to refer to them as experimental novels, with the phrase possessing a meaning different from its more common usage. From this simple initial setup, the subjects of observation in Yukikaze are relatively easy to grasp. In the first place, it's not certain whether the enemy Jam are even living creatures. Or rather, they may be a type of life form completely incomprehensible to us. Yet for all that they are an impenetrable Yet for all that they are an impenetrable mystery, the fact remains that they are a very real threat that is here right before our eyes. Yukikaze is used initially by Rei Fukai and the others as an interface to machine intelligence, gathering data in battles in an attempt to understand the Jam. You could say that understanding the Jam is the battle itself. In short, Yukikaze can be read as a story in which humans mired in ignorance fight a battle using words as an interface to clear a path to understanding and then to return through that field of unknowing. Kambayashi wrote this novel at a time when this was a recurrent theme for him as a writer. In creating the world of Yukikaze, he peered into the unknown and carried out the special, dangerous duty, that is, the duty of a writer, of grasping what can be understood about the fundamental business of human existence, bringing it back to express it in words, and thus passing on the knowledge to other humans. For the author writing the story, for the reader who reads the story, and for all humanity, the battle with the Jam is not only alive, but is nothing short of a living reality. You can think of words and machines as strictly equivalent, indispensable interfaces that allowed people to affect and be affected by the chaotic natural world, sorry. This is because machine is nothing short of a word associated with a physical entity. When man differentiated himself from the natural world long ago, defined interfaces between man and the natural world, tools, words, simultaneously, necessarily, oh, geez, I flubbed commas. When man differentiated himself from the natural world long ago, defined interfaces between man and the natural world, tools, words, simultaneously, necessarily came into being. Or rather, what we call human is likely that which seeks to affect the natural world through these interfaces. Despite the fact that words and machines were created by humans, they possess an independence and autonomy, moving on their own in ways which those who create them don't anticipate. No, perhaps this definition is backwards as well. If they did not act on their own, they wouldn't deserve to be called machines and words. So then, exactly what sort of being is a human, whose only means of affecting the natural world is through these mysterious things that he has no hope of exerting complete control over? Does the essence of being human really lie in the words and machines we create, with the thing we call self merely a cast-off shell that remains here? And if our words and machines are what affect the world, won't we eventually become unnecessary to them? No, Rei Fukai might mutter, humans are necessary in battle. Then we delve deeper into the relationship between humans and words and machines. Oh geez. When we delve deeper into the relationship between humans and words and machines, we end up running into the question of what the self means in relation to a human. I'm not referring to the personal meaning of the so-called search for self. For example, as far as humans are concerned, self is not limited to the hardware that genetics bestows on us. Just as people who have lost an arm or a leg can experience the phenomenon of sensing a phantom limb, humans also have the ability to accept something added to their bodies as being part of themselves. I don't mean that they become accustomed to them as tools or machines, but that they are literally regarded as a part of the body. The same goes for the mind. I hate to express it in such a complicated way, but there's no evidence at all that the you which you believe to be yourself is actually real. That which you call your real self is an extremely nebulous thing because humans, as social beings, cannot help but incorporate their valuation by others in the construction of their self-image. The nonsense you hear of "I've found my true self" is a bit like having a piece of white paper painted black with only a bit of white left in the middle, and then having the right part insist, "I am a white circle." I also regard with suspicion those who say that society and other individuals have no impact on them, those who view I as a single cognizance subject. A being capable of recognizing that I am here cannot help but have its existence affected by, if nothing else, the simple impact generated by the act of observing itself. This is what the Heideggerian school of philosophy refers to as Dasein, which roughly translates as being there or presence. While this is carried in rather pretentious sounding concepts like geworfen Entwurf, literally a thrown projection, geworfene Entwurf. Oh, geez, it's been a long since I've had to say that. It can be summed up crudely as the existence which is detached from the being who is existing. If a being exists in actual reality, its existence is not predicated on any description or understanding, and so a being that exists constantly saying, "I am here," is engaged in a pointless reflexivity that is nothing more than ridiculous or pathetic. The moment that you are cognizant of I, a definitive separation is formed between you and that concept of I. If this cognizance doesn't occur, then no concept of I will arise. It seems that we humans, from the first moment of our being human, from the moment of creating the phenomenon of self, became sad creatures who constantly estrange ourselves from the natural world. Whether philosophically, psychologically, or by any other means, the more we try to contrive some sort of a reason for our existence, the more we seem to whittle away at ourselves. Humans are, themselves, machines. They are also words. So where in this battle with the natural world do humans fit in? This quibbling of mine has dragged on too long. Yukikaze grants us its charming insight without having to engage in such sophistic build-up. Humans are necessary in battle. Kambayashi surely keeps writing science fiction to say this over and over again. Though it seems as if he constantly says in the novel that humans are manipulated by words and machines, that there's no real need for humans and that everything should be left to the words and the machines, we cannot take these statements at face value. The more Kambayashi tries to impart power to words and machines, the more he tries to make what is human into what is inhuman, the more he succeeds in throwing the concept of humanity into sharper and more vivid relief. Rather than humanity just dissolving into nothingness, we see just how humans are necessary in battle. Kambayashi is a unique author who writes about humanity by destroying it in a style that nobody else can copy. If he were to be told that he couldn't portray humanity, meaning that he couldn't portray the cliched emotions that you find rolling around anywhere in ordinary reality, he would probably take it as a compliment. In 1999, 15 years after Rei Fukai muttered, "Humans are necessary in battle," Kambayashi unleashed his carefully prepared sequel, Good Luck, Yukikaze, upon the world. As if his intervening works had meticulously laid the groundwork for a new flight for Yukikaze, the novel was a masterpiece that drew on 15 years of battle victories. In the first book, humans faced the threat of having their reality collapse under the power of words and machines. The struggles of the characters left the reader with a strong impression of trauma and confusion. And because of that, the author earned such comparisons as the Philip K. Dick of Japan. In the sequel, however, humans seem to be slowly but surely gathering the strength to take back their world. We may be beings who are trapped in ignorance, who are manipulated by other beings or things beyond our comprehension, but we are human, and we are here, and people are necessary for battle. Got a problem with that? Or so the characters seem to say. And before long, the inhabitants of Kambayashi's world, these people who use words and machines as an interface to a natural world from which they are estranged, no longer seem weak, but rather resolutely strong as they rise to confront that world. You could say that he's gone from, "If you're not dancing, you'll probably be made to dance," the epigraph of Kitsune no Odore, Dance with a Fox, to, "If you're being made to dance, then dance it your way." For example, this trend became extremely pronounced in 2001's Eikyu Kikan Sochi, Eternal Return Device. The novel's characters fought with the author in a similarly strange situation, with the thrillingly depicted story of manufactured humans arguing with a superior being that could freely create and edit space. I hope that those who have picked up this copy of Yukikaze will continue on and read its sequel, Good Luck, Yukikaze. It epitomizes the whole history of the evolution of Kambayashi's work. I can't call it growth because it's evolution for the purpose of survival. From that perspective, you can truly call Yukikaze Chohei Kambayashi's life's work. In bringing the jam threat to her reader's attention, journalist Lynn Jackson says this: "The digital world seems to run counter to the very essence of our humanity, our language as well, our civilization itself. So what, exactly, are we doing turning over more and more of our existence to computers?" It's true that our civilization may run counter to human nature. So is the answer to go back to nature? I have a feeling that's what the Jam would want. Placing human beings on this grinding battlefield that dehumanizes them, repeating "people are necessary in battle" over and over is what allows us humans to remain human in the face of the Jam. Your weapons are the words and machines you couldn't otherwise comprehend. When you tire of the battle, you would do well to listen to the words of a soldier from Good Luck Yukikaze. It's not a question of what you should do, but rather what you want to do. That's the answer. The truth is, Yukikaze is a declaration of war against the world, made by Chohei Kambayashi and by you, the reader, as human beings. Engage. And that was The Jam Are There by Rei Fukai. All right, and for our last trick, we've got abbreviations and acronyms. If you've stuck around this long, you're crazy, and I appreciates you. ACS, Armament Control System. ADAG, Aerospace Defense Air Group. AAM, Air-to-Air Missile. ADC, Aerospace Defense Corps. ACLS, Automatic Carrier Landing System. A/GAS, Anti-Ground Attack System. AGM, Air-to-Ground Missile. AIM, Air Intercept Missile. ALS, Automatic Landing System. AWACS, Airborne Early Warning and Control System. BIT, Built-in Test. CAP, Combat Air Patrol. CAS, Calibrated Air Speed. CDIP, Continuously Displayed Impact Point. CIC, Combat Information Control. DLC, Direct Lift Control. ECM, Electronic Countermeasures. ECCM, Electronic Countermeasures. ECS, Environmental Control System. EDF, Earth Defense Force. EMI, Electromagnetic Interference. EMP, Electromagnetic Pulse. EWO, Electronic Warfare Officer. FAB, Faery Air Base. FAF, Faery Air Force. FCC, Fire Control Computer. FCR, Fire Control Radar. FCS, Fire Control System. GHQ, General Headquarters. GLOC, G-induced loss of consciousness. GTGM, ground-to-ground missiles. HAAM, high-velocity air-to-air missile. HUD, HUD, heads-up display. HVM, high-velocity missile. IFF, identification friend or foe. JFS, jet fuel starter. KIA, killed in action. MAX, maximum power. MFD, multifunction display. MIL, military power. MTI, moving target indicator. RPM, revolutions per minute. RPV, remotely piloted vehicle. RTB, return to base. RWR, radar warning receiver. SAF, Special Air Force. SAM, surface-to-air missile. SOP, standard operating procedure. SSL, SAF Super Link. TAB, Tactical Air Base. TAF, Tactical Air Force. TAISP, Tactical Automated Information Sensor Pod. TARPS, Tactical Airborne Reconnaissance Pod System. TCG, Tactical Combat Group. TCU, Tactical Control Unit. TD, Target Designator. TDB, Tactical Data Bank. TDG, Technology Development Center. UNEDO, United Nations Earth Defense Organization. And that'll do it. That's the whole shebang. That is all of Yukikaze by Chohei Kambayashi. I hope people enjoyed. I certainly did. It's been fun to get back to it. Next week, next Monday, I am not sure what I'll be reading. Good Money is on Full Metal Panic, the first story, or first volume of that. But we'll see. We'll see how I'm doing. So for going forward, this Wednesday we will be starting reading Absolution by Jeff Vandermeer, the fourth and most recent of the Southern Reach series. And then on Friday we will continue to read more of The Dark Forest. We are at the point immediately before everything goes completely bananas. Things are building up. We're about to launch into orbit, very literally. Yeah, that'll do it. I gotta run. I got stuff I gotta get done. Thanks for tuning in. If you are listening to this after the fact and want to listen to me live, I do these live every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, starting at noon, 12 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, U.S. East Coast time, or UTC -5, as per your preference. Anyway, with that, I'm going to leave you all to your lovely days. Stay safe, stay sane, and be decent to each other. Until next time.